Hey everybody, it's the last Monday in March, the 28th, 2011. It is about 9:33, so 3 minutes after 9:30. And you know, this is sort of a response to a series that somebody I've subscribed to called Comicviewer 2 has been doing on YouTube lately. You see, what he's been doing this series called Countdown to Genesis. Now, you may say that Comic Review 2's reviews and stuff are similar to mine, and maybe they are. And if you got some inspiration from me, I appreciate that. But if not, then, you know, kudos to him, doing his own thing. But the one thing I will say about his Countdown to Genesis, there's an episode he has on YouTube now, the newest one called Episode 4, where he talks about the reboot. And he basically points out that it's an experimental reboot, and he kind of gives examples, I guess, the best that he can of what an experimental reboot is. Now, basically, he took his church, for example. His church, basically, he said, is moving them into a gym temporarily while they renovate the church building, kind of expand on it or something, or make it better. Now, he calls this a experimental reboot because what they're doing is experimenting with the renovation, trying to take what was good and build on that with something better. Now, he gave some other examples. Would that happen within the comic as well? Like experimental reboots of writing styles, experimental reboots with characters, experimental reboots in art, if you will. Excuse me. I'm getting over a cough and cold here. But he gave all these examples. For example, he says that when the comic first started, it was all comedic. It was kind of a blender, if you will, a blender mix of original stories mixed in with the games, mixed in with a bit of the games, mixed in with the Saturday morning characters and influences, as well as the comedic relief, the comedic humor of adventures. He said that was all experiment. He said he uses the example that we started out with that, but then as soon as you get into almost like the later issues, like into the late teens and into the early and into the 20s and mostly into the 30s and in the 40s, we start going from what he says is that with the experimental reboot is that we start going from all the comedic that we had all the way into a more dramatic, more action-based, more almost satire influenced comic. But it's still, even doing this experimental reboot, still kept elements of when it first started, like the humor and stuff. I mean, I remember issue 29, which my mom got me, where Sally is temporarily roboticized. Even though that's something that you would probably see in an episode of Saturday AM, they still kept the humor of adventures. They still kept the humor of adventures when they had Dulcie come to the rescue, help de-roboticize Sally, and then basically breathe fire at Robotnik and Snively and catch Robotnik's pants on fire. And he's like, as he's running off, he's telling Snively, "Get my fire retardant shorts or something like that, or underwear or something." You get what I'm saying, right? That's basically what this is when it comes to experimental. It's basically blending in, taking what was good and combining it with something better. And the writing styles, again, he even brings it out. No one would have expected that, okay, one issue you got comedy, next issue it's all dark and dramatic. That's experimental reboot. I'll give you another example. Folks. The characters, like he said. You wouldn't have expected an Amy Rose character. When she first appeared, she was the Amy Rose everybody knew from Sonic CD. She was basically that young Amy Rose. Now, what did they do with her? Even after they aged her, even after they kind of told their version of how they aged her, instead of just going like one issue, instead of doing what they did with Sally, instead of going one issue, all of a sudden, she's pink. Like, remember with Sally, when in the comic, when she was just all pink and she had the black hair and all that for most of the time? Remember how all of a sudden, I think around issue 15 or 16, all of a sudden she's her Satyam design and her color? No one would have expected that. But that was a reboot of her character. It was still the same characteristics. It was still the same character, different design. Same with Amy. Here she was, still the same character. Now, true, they could have honestly done what they did with Sally. They could have gone one issue, okay, here's Amy as you've known us in Sonic CD, and then the next issue, oh, here's Amy again, but she has the design of Sonic Adventure. But they didn't do it that way. Instead, they wanted to retell Amy's rebooting. They basically wanted to tell Amy's rebooting in character design by kind of putting a story around it. And the story was the fact that she used the Ring of Acorns to wish herself older. Now, mentally, according to many, since that time, even though she was older, she was still mentally the same age as she was before. As a matter of fact, they even did a side story where her and Tails were going to school, and even though she was older, she found out she still had to go to the same age classes as Tails. Get what I'm saying? And then recently, despite how people feel about it, they rebooted her character again just a tiny bit by making her finally grow up and realize that if she cares and loves Sonic as much as she says she does, then let him be with who he wants to be with. Let him be happy with who he wants to be happy with. And that's what they did. You see the same thing. The same thing can be said for Genesis. But there are other examples out there too. I mean, as he mentioned, there are other examples. I mean, if you want to look at characters in the comic, take a look at Bunny Rabbit. And one of the super specials was focused on all the girl characters. Sally, Bunny, Julie Sue, Hershey. And despite what people say, I think Hershey's still alive. I've got that feeling. Ian's probably just trying to throw us off. Read Bumble King forums, you'll know what I mean. Or even read the cartoons and comics discussion section in Sega.com and Sonic Stadium. You'll see what I mean. Anyway. I had to move my cat there. She was messing with the cord. Anyway. Take a look at that issue. Take a look at that 48-page special. They did an issue. The story they did on Bunny is basically they rebooted her character by having her Satyam parts, the roboticized limbs, the legs and arms that we've known her for since Satyam. They rebooted her by replacing those with more almost cybernetic, almost lifelike, kind of more cybernetic, more human-like limbs than what she had before. Get what I'm saying? In other words, they kind of made her more feminine and more kind of, like I said, lifelike than what you would have seen the other ones with. That's sort of called a reboot. All right? That's sort of what's called a reboot. Now, an experimental reboot is it's like Comicviewer 2 and a few other people have been pointing out. It's basically an experiment on how things would have been if this was the origin story. I mean, there have been many different retellings of different origins in many comic books. I'm not lying, folks. I'm not lying. There have been many different retellings and reboots during certain experimental or certain full-on reboots. Basically, it's a different retelling. Basically, it's like a what if. That's what it is. Okay, for example, what if? You remember those what if comics that would come out by Marvel? Like, what if this happened or what if that happened with a character? That's sort of what Genesis is being portrayed as. Now, true, there may be some elements there may be something in there that ties in with the current storyline. There may be. I mean, the one thing that throws a lot of people off is all the quotations that Ian puts into the sketches and everything, saying it's all part of a game, it's this. And that kind of throws people off, like wondering, okay, well, what does this have to do with Genesis if it's an experimental reboot? What's going on? You see, nobody really knows. And then Ian says at the end of the deal that seeing who comes back and how is all part of the surprise. So even though Ian has come out, according to many people and many sources that are close to him, whether the artists or whether the people that are administrators and moderators on his forum, a lot of people, like I said, that are like administrators and moderators on his forums, editors of the comic, or even artists, even those that have come out and said, oh, don't worry, all these characters that you're worried about are fine. Even though that's even though he says that, even though people are saying that, Ian still likes to throw the red herrings because he wants to throw you off. And there's a reason Ian likes to do that. It's the same reason any writer that does an experimental reboot does something like this, does it. Because they don't want you to get so close. They want to push you back as far as you can be. In other words, when they know you're getting close, they got to throw out a red herring to throw you off. Then they tell the people that are close to them, hey, don't let them know so much information. Here, throw them a red herring. That's what writers of an experimental reboot do. They throw out these red herrings because they know you're getting close, so they throw out the red herrings to throw you off and push you back even further so you don't know. All right? That's why they do it. I mean, I'll give you another example, too. And I'm sorry if this video is in two parts, because I've yet to regain the extended time limit, so I apologize for that. But another way to look at this, let's take a look at WCW, World Championship Wrestling. Now, back in 2000, WCW did what was known as an experimental reboot in April of that year. Well, basically, they had on screen, and I guess behind the scenes, Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo strip all the current champions of the titles and put all those championships that were now vacated on the line at the pay-per-view to give them so that, I guess, storyline-wise and behind-the-scene-wise, younger wrestlers can get a hold of them. Younger wrestlers, up-and-coming wrestlers, those that were never given a chance at being a champion or being the top guy in a promotion, here was their opportunity to do just that. Excuse me. But again, here was the opportunity to do just that. Now, the reason WCW did this experimental reboot was due to the fact that they were falling behind to the WWE, because the WWE was basically kicking their ass by doing exactly what WCW was doing, or doing exactly what WCW was trying doing, but already doing it, and that was establishing and pushing up-and-coming stars. So what did WCW do? They decided to do an experimental reboot, vacate